Today, I'm going to walk you through 73 different ways in which AI can help authors write. This is specifically talking about language models and using tools like ChatGPT or Prewriting in order to write books or do other parts of the writing process. I am not going to be touching on art or any of the different ways that authors can use art in their business. That is an entirely different video that I will do somewhere down the line. But for this video, we're going to be touching solely on the use of large language models like GPT, like Claude, etc., and all of the different ways. I've got a comprehensive list of everything I could come up with of 73 different ways that you could use these large language models in your author business. I highly recommend that you don't do all of these, okay? Because the way these things work is that, generally speaking, every author has a part of the writing or marketing process that they don't really like. You might love the writing, but you might hate writing a book description. You might love doing the outline and hate doing the actual writing part. You might, there's a number of different ways you could do it. I feel like every author has at least one or two really strong pain points. And this is why I believe that AI will eventually, people won't have as much of an issue with it. Right now, people that are spoken out against AI are really thinking that we're using it to press a button and generate an entire book. And that's simply not the case. It can be used at every part of the process to create a very AI-heavy book. But I feel like the way it's going to be used in general is going to be to take the effort out of the most painful part of the process for us. And I feel like even the naysayers and the critics are going to be like, yeah, well, you can't write a book, but like maybe a book description is okay. Or maybe just generating some initial ideas is okay. Whatever the case is, this is everything that I could come up with on how you can use AI. And I've split it into 5 different areas. We have the pre-writing, we have the writing and the editing, we have marketing, we have learning, and then I just had a 5th other miscellaneous category for things that didn't quite fit into the prior 4. So let's dive into the first one, which is pre-writing. First thing I want to talk about here is idea suggestions. This is pretty simple. I think most people that have used AI have used it for this. Sometimes we're just a little bit stumped and we can just ask ChatGPT to give us a few ideas on a certain line of thought, and it can give it to us. And it does a really good job. And in fact, I feel like this is probably the best use case of AI for the general public. And most people that are going to be using it are going to be using it for this. Going along with that, it's really good for creating writing prompts. So sometimes when we want to deliberately practice our craft and get better, it's important to take writing prompts instead of just writing the next scene in your book. It might be better for your own training and your own learning to actually take a writing prompt and say, like, I need to get better at doing this thing with characters. Well, you generate a bunch of writing prompts around that thing, and you just go through each one and write a scene about it. That's a great way to go as well. You can also use it for character suggestions. I found that a lot of my early books were very light on different characters, and the characters I had were not all that differentiated. And so you can use ChatGPT to not only give you ideas for characters that are appropriate to the story, but also to give you ideas for ways to make them stand apart. Character profile creation. So this is where, and not all authors do this, but this is where you can create an entire backstory and profile, physical appearance, personality, everything you could think of about the character. AI is really good for helping to generate all of that side information that might not necessarily be directly pertinent to the story, but can still color the personality as you write that character, knowing all of those things. You can use it for plot and outline suggestions, of course. And this is another thing that I think a lot of authors are going to be using. They'll be like, well, I know I need to have the character go through some kind of trial in this chapter, but I really don't know what it is. Could you give me an example? Or you can even say, hey, I have this plot idea. Can you give me a synopsis for this whole thing? That's a great way to go. You can also use it to generate subplots. This is something I also struggle with, is I can get the main story down, but sometimes it's good to have a subplot or two to carry things through. And so being able to feed it your outline and say, give me 1 or 2 subplots and chart the progression is a really great idea. Theme identification. I feel like a lot of authors struggle with theme and identifying what it should be, especially if you write commercial fiction. Sometimes you're like, well, I just want to write something that's enjoyable. But every book, in my opinion, should have some kind of theme. So identifying what that could be and brainstorming ideas is a great idea. Synopsis writing, I touched on this already, but taking your idea and fleshing it out into a full-on Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 synopsis. Creating a story Bible, especially with some of these larger models like Claude 100K, which can actually process your entire book. You can use it to create summaries of your different characters and things like that. Or as you are creating the stories, like for instance, the character profiles, as you are putting all of those together, you can just copy paste that into some form of story Bible as well. World building, great resource for world building to just generate ideas and flesh out the world in ways that are pertinent to the story. In a way that would have taken Tolkien, and did take Tolkien 20 years, you could probably do it in a lot less than that. If you want to be traditionally published, you can use AI to help you write your query letter. Now, keep in mind, you don't want it to sound like AI wrote your query letter, but sometimes it can help you get started and get going in the right direction. Mind mapping. This is something I don't particularly do, but sometimes you can just have a whole lot of ideas all over the place and you don't really know how they all fit together. Using AI to kind of mind map it for you is a great idea. Fight scene choreography. Fight scenes are often very tough for a lot of people because not only do you have to keep it interesting, which is hard to do in a non-visual format, you have to kind of know where everything goes and where to put the emphasis in your writing and what is actually happening in a way that is still interesting to the reader. And so using AI to just say, like, what's the choreography of this fight is a really fun idea. Timeline creation, so just charting the timeline for your book or maybe the timeline of your world. Extrapolation assistant, so that's, giving it a scenario and then asking it to kind of complete the idea. And that's it for pre-writing. So moving on to writing and editing, we've got the actual writing. And this is only one line on here, but it really is, I think, one of the biggest. And for me, the one that I spend the most time on. But that is a big thing with AI, is actually doing the actual writing and helping you out and getting that to a decent place before you edit it. It can fix grammar and punctuation, and some AI tools are actually built for this, like Prewriting Aid, which is the one I recommend, at identifying grammar and punctuation. Using a tool like ChatGPT you can just ask it to fix your grammar and punctuation, and it will usually do a good job, but that is often kind of a messy way to do it. So I would use a tool. Text analysis. So you can feed it some of your text and say, what are some ways in which I could improve this text, or analyze the style of this text, or something like that. Creating descriptions. So you might get to a point in your novel that said, well, this is a little too vague. I need to describe it a little better, or I'm telling here when I should be showing. You can give the AI that, ask it to improve the descriptions or show instead of tell, and it usually does, especially in that editing kind of format. It does a really good job at helping with those sections. Dialogue improvements. So you can actually just give it some text, some dialogue that you have written, and ask it to improve it. And it might not do a good job if all you say is make this better, but if you give it a little more background and structure to say how you want it to be better, it can usually do a decent job of improving on what is already written. And this is really helpful for me because I get really perfectionist with my dialogue and I'm always second guessing what I write. And so being able to run it through a tool like ChatGPT to improve the dialogue is great. Autocomplete. So maybe you don't like to plan it out ahead of time. You just give it a paragraph and say, I don't know what to write next. Just give me another paragraph. And you can autocomplete it. And sometimes what it gives you is usable. Sometimes it isn't. But very often, if you do that, you will kind of figure out which direction you want to go, whether it is the way the AI took it or by knowing what it shouldn't be, you often can figure out what it should be. So it's a great way to get past writer's block in that sense. It's good for writing poetry. Now, it's not the best poet in the world, but if you have a book with a poem in it and you suck at writing poetry, then maybe you could give it a try in ChatGPT first and then edit it to how you like. If you are a poet, you can use it in the same way that I would use it as a writer to get you 50% of the way there if you want, or to generate ideas, and then you can take it from there. This is one of the tools I bet everyone's going to be using it for in the near future, even those that don't use AI or that claim to be anti-AI, is as a thesaurus. Authors go to thesaurus.com all the time, right? But the problem with thesaurus.com is it doesn't always understand the context in which you want a different word. And it's coming up with very direct one-to-one alternatives for you, whereas ChatGPT has a much more nuanced understanding of maybe you'd want to say it in this way, which thesaurus.com would not necessarily be able to tell you because it's only looking at one words or very simple phrases. You can use it to imitate unique styles. Now, I don't recommend that you, just for ethical reasons, that you use somebody else's style for someone who's living and whose work is copyrighted. We're going to see where laws go on that, but just for ethical reasons, I would not recommend you do that. But using it for authors that have come in the past, so whose work is in the public domain, that is absolutely acceptable. And as well as maybe analyzing your own writing, picking out information about it, and then creating a style, telling ChatGPT, do it in this style with A, B, and C, that you extracted from that description of your style can be really useful. Adapting to a screenplay, and I should say adapting from a screenplay. AI is going to make it very simple to adapt different words directly. Now, of course, if you are writing a book and then turning it into a movie, you got to understand that it's not going to be a one-to-one scene recreation, right? You've got to keep in mind the rules of the medium. For instance, a film usually has to cut out a lot to make it fit and make it work as a movie. But just getting that initial, I need to convert this to a screenplay, that can be really helpful. I've also found that by taking a screenplay, an already existing screenplay, feeding that into ChatGPT and saying, keep the dialogue and everything and the general beats and everything, but just add more description, add more prose, turn it into a novel, can be a great way to go. It's also, now I've got a caveat on this one. It can be a good place to start with sensitivity reading. You feed it a little bit of text that might require a sensitivity reader, and it can sometimes tell you if there's something you should be worried about there. If not, well, no matter what you do, I still highly, highly recommend, if you are worried about this, that you get an actual sensitivity reader. So if you have a person of color, for example, that you find someone in that marginalized group or that minority, whatever the case it might be, to look through it and tell you, because they are going to be able to tell you a lot better than ChatGPT could. but it can be still a good way to just ask questions and see if there could be an answer and maybe why. All right. It can be good to search for the most common words that you're using in your manuscript. So I tend to overuse a couple of words, and most authors do. And so you can feed it what you've got and say, what are some common cliches in this writing, or words that are overused, or different methods that I use too often, that sort of thing. You can also ask it for conflict suggestions. Conflict is the lifeblood of any good story. And so feeding that to the AI, feeding a scene that might seem really dull, or, maybe it's just a couple of people in a room talking, and you realize it needs a little extra conflict, a little extra oomph. You can give it the scene and say, what are some ideas for creating additional conflict in here? And then you can ask it to add those things in. You can use it to enhance your vocabulary, because AI, while it does tend to use a simpler vocabulary, if you ask it to improve for instance, the Flesch reading ease score, or to just improve the vocabulary, you could say, take this to an 8th grade reading level or something, then that can work. Making sure you're consistent with your point of view. This is a problem for a lot of authors that are maybe using a point of view that is not the one they normally use, or tense consistency. So both of these. So maybe you're writing a present tense book, which for me, I've tried doing that, and I keep slipping back into past tense all the time. And so making sure you're keeping your point of view and your tense consistent is one of the things that AI is really good at. You just feed it the text and say, make sure that all of this is in the past tense or the present tense or whatever it is, and it's really good at that. You can use AI to write children's books. You can use AI to write comic books. Those are pretty straightforward. All right, moving on to the marketing portion here. Got a lot of these. AI is really good for identifying your audience and giving you ideas on what your audience might like. I did a video on this, on how to create a custom avatar for your author business that you should definitely check out. But every business should start by figuring out who the audience is, and so AI can be a great help in at least helping you figure out where the big, what are the big things that those people like. It's a good way to generate titles. I put this here under marketing because the title is part of your marketing, and that you should definitely make sure you're understanding the conventions of your title in order to do this. And then here's a big one that I feel like a lot of authors are going to be using it for, is generating descriptions, because it's actually remarkably good at generating descriptions. And even if you're an expert in it, it can usually help you get 50% of the way there. And authors, I don't know why, but authors seem to hate writing descriptions. I honestly don't know why. But this is probably going to put a lot of description generating services out of business, honestly, if I'm being perfectly honest, because this is something that AI is really good at, and I think a lot of authors are just going to come over to the AI side just for this particular feature. In my video on the audience avatar, one of the fun things that I did there is interact with my avatar. So I fed my avatar to the AI and said, hey, I want you to act like this person. And then I would ask that person questions, and some cool things can come out of that. It's a fun little exercise, if not perfect, and definitely not a replacement for actually talking to a person who is part of your audience. AI is a really good tool for getting keyword ideas. And I'll do a video soon about how to do this with a tool like Publisher Rocket. But sometimes it's hard to get those initial ideas of what the keywords should be. Like, we get stuck on, okay, this is an epic fantasy romance. And then that's all you can think of is epic fantasy romance. Like, what other things could it be? Could it be like a strong female protagonist, or, a made up world? There's all kinds of things. And knowing where to start with those keywords and then plugging those into a keyword research tool can be really helpful. Creating your headlines and your text for emails. Another thing that authors really don't like doing. Again, I'm not really sure why. Maybe I'm just too much of a marketing nerd, but I love learning about copywriting and things. And I think that's one of the things I'll be expanding this channel to eventually, is doing like copywriting, just because it's really fun to me. Don't worry, I'm keeping the focus on fiction for the foreseeable future. And then kind of going along with that is creating headlines for ads. Another thing that's difficult if you don't have a background in copywriting, and AI could definitely help you with that. And also along the same lines, creating social media posts. So one of the things I like to do is actually feed it some of my text and say, give me a Twitter thread that's 10 tweets long that is related to this, or give me a couple of Instagram post captions or something like that. A lot you can do there. And you can also use it for hashtag generation. So if you're making an Instagram post and you just don't want to type out all the hashtags, just go to ChatGPT, ask for 10 hashtags around a certain topic, and it could do that. It could also help you formulate your book launch plan. So let's say you've got a book launch coming up. You have some book promotions booked, that you want to have a plan for your advertising and other things like that, different times to send emails. You can use it to help you schedule all of those things in a way that kind of makes sense so that you have something to work with. You can also use it to write your author bio. So you just feed it a few things about yourself and say, here, write me an author bio of 100 words or something like that. Then we have blog post generation. So if you're like me and you have websites and use them to market your books, you can do that. You can also use it to write recipes. I put this under marketing because I've found that some authors in certain genres actually create recipes for foods that are found within their books. And so that can be just a fun little marketing tool to share with your email list or what have you, or give away as a reader magnet. It can be a fun thing there. You can use it to generate audio and video sales scripts. So if you're doing like a TikTok video or something like that, and you want a script to help sell your book, it can help you formulate those scripts. You can use it for meme generation. So say you have an image and you want a caption, you can use it for that. It can give you merchandise ideas. And with the writing, you can't build a ton of that merchandise, but it can definitely get you started on like a number of things that your audience might be interested in purchasing from you if they're fans of your book. You can use it for outreach emails. So this is different from creating your normal newsletter emails, but this is emails reaching out to people who could potentially promote your book in some way, whether maybe a link to your book or coordinating a newsletter swap or something like that. You can use it to help you generate a press release around the launch of your book. You can use it to optimize a title or a subtitle of your book, or a blog post or anything. You can use it to write copy for your website. So if you have sales copy promoting your book, something like that can help. You can use it to create a plan around branding, different ways that you want to brand yourself. So you just say, here's kind of what I'm thinking. Here are a few things that I think is part of my personality, my brand. Give me ideas for a logo or different ways to approach my book marketing and all that. Okay, I feel like I've been talking a lot here. Moving on to learning. Now, this is something I don't think authors should skip out on, because ChatGPT actually can be a really good resource for just learning new things. For one, it can be a good place to explore your genre and do research around that and uncover what the tropes are and things like that. That's the second thing there, trope identification. Every genre has a whole bunch of tropes, and understanding what those tropes are can be really essential for creating a book that people like. And then using it as a research assistant. This is especially true in certain genres. I'd say the big one, the obvious one, is historical fiction. But even if you write a contemporary story, maybe you've never been to Paris before and you're writing a book set in Paris, getting some information that won't necessarily be as Googleable. Is that a word? You can't necessarily Google what it feels like to be, I don't know, on a cobbled street in Paris, or I don't know. There are a lot of ways you can go about it. Authors tend to have very specific needs in the kind of research that they are trying to do. And while ChatGPT does make stuff up, so you have to be careful about that and verify all of the facts it gives you, it can also do a much better job of extrapolating, like, what would it have been like to live as a Briton in 500 AD, that sort of thing, and taking what it does know and extrapolating that in a way that works for your book. You can use it to help organize your writing schedule. So just using it as a kind of research or as an assistant, a personal assistant, to do a lot of that work for you. And then you can use it as a writing coach. I did a video about this where you can basically tell it to become a coach and ask you questions and help you work your way through any problems you have. That's a great resource. You can use it to analyze your style. I've kind of talked about that already. You can use it to analyze another author's style. So you just feed it some text that you like and then learn what it is about that style that it is doing. And then you can pick different things like, oh, this one uses really punchy dialogue that gets straight to the point. And then you can then incorporate that into your styles. You can use it to analyze reviews. So actually Amazon is going to be doing this. Apparently they are experimenting with a review summary, where you can just get the gist of all of the reviews kind of all together. And that's kind of a cool feature. And but you could also take other reviews, feed them all into ChatGPT and say, what's the general gist of all of these reviews? It's kind of a cool option. You can use it to get book suggestions. So especially with some of the plugins that there are now, you can actually ask ChatGPT, what are some book suggestions for, whatever it is you're interested in reading. And I have a feeling this is going to become a much bigger thing in the future. There are probably going to be some new tool out there that's going to take off among readers for people who really want to have a comprehensive database that is recommending them things that they actually do enjoy and want to read. All right, and now we're at our last one here. A couple of miscellaneous items. Bibliography creation. So if you write nonfiction, bibliographies are a pain to do, and so giving it some of the information you need and having it just automatically format it into an MLA or Chicago or whatever the different formats are for that. And I probably got those wrong. Honestly, it's been a long time since I was in college doing bibliographies. But you can definitely use it in that way. You can use it to generate footnotes if you want, and then you can take those footnotes and just copy paste them into a program like Atticus. You can use them to clean up dictated text. So if you dictate, obviously there are a lot of errors that come from that. If you feed that into ChatGPT, it will often do a really good job of being able to clean those things up. Translation. So I can't say with any certainty how good the translation is. Is it better or worse than something like Google Translate? My gut instinct would be that it's better currently, especially ChatGPT. But there's a good chance that there's going to be more AI integrated into Google Translate very soon, which will make it even better than it is. And certainly those technologies are constantly progressing and getting better. But ChatGPT does a good job of understanding context. And so being able to get at least a rough draft of a translation for your book is certainly possible now with ChatGPT. And then you can maybe hire someone as a proofreader or something like that to make sure that everything flows well. You can use it to create a role-playing game. So feeding it some details about your world and then going back and forth on the different rules you want to have and everything, and then helping to create that initial content is something you could definitely use AI for. You can use it you can feed it your character profiles and then interact with those characters in some way. You can use it to create a copyright page. with just basic copyright information. You can use it for to generate prompts for images. So, like I said, this isn't a video about images, but if you use ChatGPT in the right way, you can actually use it to create the prompts that you can then take and plug into a program like Midjourney, and often producing much better results from that. You can use it to brainstorm your company or your imprint names. You can use it for title capitalization. This was a random one, but sometimes you're like, I don't know if this word should be capitalized in this thing or not. And so you just feed it in and say, like, capitalize this according to the Chicago Manual or whatever, and it can do that for you. And that is 73 everything I could come up with on ways to use ChatGPT or any other similar language model. If you have any that you would add that you feel like I missed, be sure to leave that in the comments below. I want to read that, and maybe I'll do a follow-up on this sometime in the future. And I'll see you in the next video.